Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Magic the Conversation. This week we will be going over the 10th expansion in Magic called Visions. Visions continues the storyline from the Mirage block. When we had last left off in Mirage, Karvik was trying to conquer the continent, and he had trapped Mangara in an amber prison while Teferi had disappeared in time because he was experimenting with time magic. Teferi eventually returns, and he acts once again as peacekeeper to reunite everybody under the Zalfran flag to fight Karvik once again. This includes Karvik's former ally Jolrael. Teferi convinces her to betray Karvik, and Karvik is eventually defeated in his campaign to take over Jamara. The set symbol is the Triangle of War. That's what the big V in the set symbol stands for. And now that the story has been summarized, let's go over the cards themselves. Hey, Majin Diamond. Welcome in. Good to see you. Starting off, we have Aku Jin. 5 mana, 5/6 trample. Ready pretty good. During your upkeep, each opponent puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature he or she controls. So now that's not so good. Just like with the Mirage set, Jins always come with a price to them. So if you have a way to destroy your opponent's creatures or make sure they don't have creatures out, then you can use Aku Jin risk-free. Your arrogance amazes me, Karvik. Did you not know the price you would pay? This is a quote from Mangara after Mangara is freed from the Amber prison and he is ultimately defeated. I really like the artwork on Aku Jin. It's probably one of my favorite Jins in Magic. I can't say I've ever... I do own the card, but I can't say I've ever used it. Next, we have Anvil of Bogarden. 2 mana, each player skips their discard step. During each player's draw step, they can draw an additional card. Oh, they do have to draw an additional card, and then they choose and discard a card from their hand. Archangel, 7 mana, 5/5 flying. Attacking doesn't cause it to tap, which is the key word for vigilance. My mother once told me angels sing their swords' names with each strike. This is a quote from Sisay, captain of the Weatherlight. Sisay will be a key character in Magic's future. It will go over more about the Weatherlight in the next set. Sisay comes from the continent of Jamora, so that's why it has some quotes for her. She eventually becomes a captain of the Weatherlight, which is a sky ship, which we will later discuss in the Weatherlight set, which comes after Visions. Army Ants, 3 mana, 1/1. You can tap them to sacrifice a land to destroy target land. Do not underestimate the power of many against one. By Sidar Jabari. Currently my favorite card in the set. You do have to kind of build your deck around them because you're sacrificing one of your own lands to destroy another land. There's a really powerful artifact called Crucible of Worlds. It only costs 3 mana and it lets you play lands from your graveyard as though they were in your hand. So if you have that card out with Army Ants, then you can freely sacrifice your land without falling behind in mana, so to speak. There's a land you sacrificed you could just put back onto the battlefield. It still counts as your land drop for the turn. Betrayal. For 1 blue, you can only play on an opponent's creature. When the opponent's creature becomes tapped, you draw a card. Sometimes a burden can be borne only on the shoulders of a willing enemy. It's a Sequata aphorism. In the middle of combat, this guy's ally, in quotes, betrayed him. You could get some card draw out of this card, but I've never really seen it used. Blanket of Night, 3-mana enchantment. Each mana producing land is a swamp in addition to its normal land type. Karvik imprisoned Mangara out of jealousy, but he taints Jamara simply out of spite. Azmira the Holy Avenger. So this makes every land in play a swamp in addition to its land type. So all lands are able to still tap for the mana that they normally tap, or they could also tap for a black. This card is good if you have creatures with Swamp Walk, because that means your creatures are basically unblockable at this point, or any cards that do target swamps, and there are a lot of them. We have reviewed quite a few in the past sets. Bogardan Phoenix, 5 mana, 3/3 flying. When Bogardan Phoenix dies, if it doesn't have any death counters on it, return it to the battlefield with a death counter. If Bogardan Phoenix is put into the graveyard from play and it has a death counter on it, remove it from the game. So this Phoenix can only be reborn once unless you have a way to remove the death counter. There are a few ways to remove counters from your creatures. Brass Talon Chimera. 4 mana, 2/2, first strike. Its creature type is a Chimera. You can sacrifice it at any time to put a +2/+2 counter on target Chimera, and that Chimera permanently gains first strike. There is, I think there's 4 Chimeras in total in that set. The idea is you put them all together to make some sort of like Megazord. But I think the idea fell flat because I tried to use them in a deck and they never really did much good. I think they cost too much mana, and being an artifact, it is easily killed by a lot of things. But the idea, the flavor-wise, idea of it's pretty cool. With the inclusion of changelings, which count as every creature type, it might be a strategy to revisit. But even then, it's not going to be game breaking. Breath Stealer's Crypt, black and blue. Whenever any player draws a card, they may reveal it. If the card is a creature card, that player must pay 3 life or discard the card. Far too many soldiers have died in their beds. The Breath Stealer was one of the Night Stalkers in the Mirage set that helped summon the Spirit of the Night. Breezekeeper. This was one of my first blue cards that I owned. 4 mana, 4/4 flying. It's a Djinn. His only drawback is he has phasing, so you can only use him every other turn. He blows a gust across the cliff to vanish in a breath of wind. Song of the Wind Being. Probably one of the least pricey Djinns as far as their drawbacks to them. Brood of Cockroaches. I like this better than Army Ants. For 2 mana, 1/1. If Brood of Cockroaches dies, pay 1 life and return them to your hand at the end of your turn. It's like waking on a bed of 1,000 olives during an earthquake of subtle force. Fairy Tales. Just the idea of this poor person being invaded by a bunch of cockroaches while they sleep. Deadly? Not quite, but this creature could keep coming back every turn as long as you have the life to pay. You could use it for like a sacrifice engine. Or if you have a bug deck where your bugs do get larger and larger. Bull Elephant. 4 mana, 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, return 2 forests you control to your hand or sacrifice the elephant. 4 gray trees and a long coiling snake. What am I? Zalfrin Riddle. Well, that's an elephant. It doesn't have trample, unfortunately. It's 4 mana, 4/4. Returning the 2/4 you control is its drawback, because if you, the earliest you can play this if you don't have any mana makers out is turn 4. So returning the 2/4 on your hand, you're down to 2 land, and then on your 5th turn you can play 1 land, and you only have you're down like 2 mana. So not worth it in today's standards, but it's still for its cost, 4 mana, 4/4 is nothing to take lightly. Chronotog, 2 mana, 1/2. Skip your next turn, and he gets +3/+3 until end of turn. You could use the ability only once each turn. For the Chronotog, there is no meal like the present. This is part of the Atogs. We saw 4 Atog in the Mirage set. This is probably one of the most powerful ones because you don't have to have any cards out on the battlefield. You're literally skipping your next whole turn to boost them up. So, and you can use this at any time. That could be bad against in a lot of situations, but it also could be really good. If you don't want to draw a card in your next turn, skipping your whole turn will stop any of that from happening. I like the artwork on it too. He looks like a mushroom frog salamander. City of Solitude, for 3 mana. Each player may play spells and abilities only during their own turn. So this shuts down instants, definitely stops counter spells. My horizon was the arcing petals, my new home resplendent with spires of weeds and pillows of fragrant pollen. Naima, the Ephemera Philosopher. Cloud Elemental, 3 mana, 2/3 flying. It could only block creatures with flying. You know you've angered the gods when the clouds turn against you. Sisay, Captain of the Weatherlight. I don't really have anything to say about that card. It's not so good. Coercion, for 3 mana. Look at target opponent's hand, choose a card in that player's hand, and that player discards it. A Rhino's Bargain, the Femriff expression meaning a situation with no choices. Good way to see what your opponent has, and since you get to choose the card, you could even choose a land if you want. There is no limit to what card they have to discard. Coral Atoll. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you must return an untapped island to your hand or sacrifice Atoll. It taps for a blue and a colorless. So the turn it comes out, you kind of have to not really play anything. And then that way, on your next turn, this land taps for 2. Corrosion. I don't think I've ever seen this card. 3 mana, it's black and red. Cumulative upkeep of 1. During your upkeep, put a rust counter on each artifact target opponent controls. If the number of rust counters on an artifact equals or exceeds that artifact's casting cost, destroy the artifact. If corrosion leaves play, remove all rust counters from the game. The more mana you have to keep corrosion alive, the more artifacts you'll be able to destroy. The weaker artifacts will be destroyed first. This would destroy every Mox diamond and all the diamonds. Not all the diamonds. The Mox jewels, since they cost 0. At the next turn when they get the first rust counter. Creeping Mold, 4 mana, destroy target artifact, land, or enchantment. Mold could catch you. It's a Sequata insult, probably meaning to be really, really slow. I don't know on this artwork. I don't really see where the mold is. It's hard to tell. I know this guy is on a horse. I don't know if the mold is creeping towards him. Like, I don't really see it on this card. It's a good card because there's 3 options. The mana is a little costly though, but green has no mana problems. Crypt Rats, 3 mana 1/1, pay X. Crypt Rats deals X damage to all creatures and players. You could only spend black mana in this way. Once I dreamt of death, but now it dreams of me, and only rats and rotting flesh can hear my silent plea. A Mundungu chant. I like Crypt Rats the best so far. If you find a way to give yourself, if you have Circle of Protection black, which is a white card, so you would have to run at least white and black, you could pay like 20 mana for Crypt Rats, and then they'll do 20 damage to all creatures and players, and as long as you have 1 mana to prevent all damage dealt to you from a source, from a black source, the Circle of Protection could save you while wiping the battlefield and dealing 20 damage to your opponent. Really powerful card for black, but you also have to build your deck around it to make sure that it doesn't kill you yourself. You could also use a bunch of life drain spells, or just make sure your life total is higher than your opponent when you choose for the Crypt Rats to pop off. And I love the artwork. They devoured all the rest of the flesh that was on the skeleton in the crypt. Daraha Griffin. 4 mana 2/2 flying. You can sacrifice it to destroy target black creature. And the flamingo said, "Get out of our nest. We can't be seen with the likes of you." So the griffin ate them. Azawari, the ugly bird. Good way to destroy black creatures. If they're not playing black, then this is just a 4 mana 2/2 flyer. I guess it would be good for Griffin if you want to build a tribal Griffin deck for removal, but there are better ways. Dark Privilege. I really like the creature on here. 2 mana, enchanted creature gets +1/+1. Sacrifice a creature to regenerate the enchanted creature. As you breathe your last, understand why I accept such forbidden gifts. Barrage of Urborg. This is one of the coolest creatures I've seen, but unfortunately I don't think there's a card of this. I assume it's some sort of demon. Death Watch. For 1 black, if enchanted creature dies, that creature's controller loses life equal to its power, and you gain an amount equal to its toughness. Watch Death Wait. Wait Death Watch. Steal breath swiftly, but steal life slowly. Sequata Dirge. Definitely situational depending on your opponent's creatures. Desertion. 5 mana. Counter target spell. If that spell was an artifact or a creature spell, put it into play under your control instead of putting it in the graveyard. First the insult, then the injury. Very powerful card for blue. Cards like this not only stop your opponent's threat, but then add to yours. Using your opponent's resources against them gives you great card advantage. Desolation. For 3 mana. At the end of each turn, each player who tapped a land for mana during that turn sacrifices a land. If a plains is sacrificed in this way, Desolation does 2 damage to that plains controller. Kill a creature, destroy the present. Kill the land, destroy the future. Quote by Karvik. This land is there. I noticed in this theme there are a lot of like cursed land destruction stuff. Choking Sands was in Mirage last week when we reviewed it, and this artwork looks pretty similar to it. Diamond Kaleidoscope. I forgot about this card, but I did own it and I used it. 4 mana artifact. Pay 3 and tap it to put a Prism token onto the battlefield. Treat the Prism token as a 0/1 artifact creature. You can sacrifice a Prism token at any time to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. A pretty toy. Now show me its tactical applications. Telementor. I remember I used this as a poor man's way of color fixing in a 5-color deck. It's very slow to put out because you need 4 mana to cast it. Then you need to pay 3 to put a Prism token out. Prism token could also be used as a chump blocker as long as the creature you're blocking doesn't have trample. And if you need the color fixing, that's always an option too. Dormant Volcano, it's the red version of the Coral Atoll, where you return an untapped mountain to get a colorless and a red whenever you're able to tap it. Dragon Mask, 3 mana artifact, pay 3, tap it. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. At the end of the turn, if that creature is still on the battlefield, return it to your hand. With no further options, I was forced to don the mask. Rashida Scalebane. Kind of costly for what it does. I hate the fact that not only do you have to pay an additional 3 mana and tap the mask just to get +2/+2, but the creature you're using it on does have to return to your hand. You could use this strategically with creatures that have entered the battlefield or leave the battlefield effects, but I still think it's too costly to justify, other than the reason I stated. Dream Tides, 4 mana, blue enchantment. Creatures do not untap as normal during their untap step. Each non-green creature's controller may pay 2 mana during their upkeep to untap that specific creature. So green creatures won't be able to untap at all with this card on the battlefield. Dwarven Vigilantes, 3 mana, 2/2. If Dwarven Vigilantes attacks and are not blocked, you may choose to have them deal no combat damage this turn. If doing so, Dwarven Vigilantes deals an amount of damage equal to their power to target creature. Some dwarves can only be pushed so far. I know there in the set prior there was the I think it was Dwarven Nomads. You can tap them to make target creature power 2 or less unblockable into end of turn. This can do a slight combo with the Vigilantes if you want to deal damage to a certain creature. Like if there's a creature with flying or a creature that's unblockable that keeps bothering you. If you can get your Vigilantes to hit the opponent, then the Vigilantes instead will hit the creature instead of the opponent. Elephant Grass, for 1 green, cumulative upkeep of 1. Black creatures cannot attack you. Non-black creatures cannot attack you unless the controller pays an additional 2 colors for each attacking creature. How have I angered nature that she would imprison me in a labyrinth of grass? Kasib Invi Naji letters. Color hosing for green against black. This card would definitely shut down black creature strategies against green. But it does have a cumulative upkeep, so it will not stay on the battlefield for very long. Thankfully for black. Elkin Lair. I don't think I've ever seen this. 4 mana. During each player's upkeep, that player chooses a card at random from their hand and sets it aside face up. The player may play that card as though it were in their hand. If the player does not play the card by the end of the turn, the card is put into the graveyard. So that's kind of a weird card that forces you to play whatever card is chosen. Otherwise, you have to throw it away. And it kind of is good against decks that use counterspells and instants, because then they can't really hold it as a surprise. If that card ends up being the chosen card, they either have to use it on that turn or it goes to the graveyard. Elven Catch. 4 mana, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. The elves can hide better than most can look. Wani the Tender Herder. Really good card because you can return any card to your hand, whether it be a creature, a land, a planeswalker, a sorcery, an instant, an artifact. The fact that it has no limits, and it's a sorcery, so there are cards that you can return. So it can return another copy of Elven Catch. It cannot return itself, but it can return other copies of Elven Catch. Nowadays, a lot of return from graveyard cards like this are exiled after they're used because of combos that could be used like this. Emerald Charm. Just like we had in the Mirage block, each color gets another version of a charm. Choose one of these. Untap a target permanent or destroy a regular enchantment, or target creature loses flying until end of turn. Equipose. 3 mana during your upkeep for each land target player controls in excess of the number of lands you control. Target land they control phases out. Repeat this process for artifacts and then for creatures. I've never seen this card before. I could assume it could be quite chaotic, giving a lot of these permanents phasing, especially if you purposely limit yourself to a number of lands and creatures and so forth. Everglades, beautiful artwork on the card. I have visited the Everglades before. This is the black version of the Coral Atoll and that dormant volcano. Eye of Singularity. For 4 mana, when Eye of Singularity comes into play, destroy all permanents with the same name except basic lands. Whenever any permanent other than a basic land enters the battlefield, destroy any permanent already in play with the same name. So this kind of gives everything the legend rule, where only one could be out on the battlefield at a time. The old school version. Fallen Ascari, 2 mana, flanking. Fallen Ascari cannot block. This guy has a tarantula coming out of his eye. These zombies. In troubled times, there are a few greater sorrows than a wayward savior. Ephemerif Enchantress, a white and a green. Whenever an enchantment is put into any graveyard from play, draw a card. Then she spread a fine dust over the land, like a butterfly shaking its wings. The Enchantress, Ephemerif Tail. Feral Instinct. 2 mana, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. If a rhino's head is lower than its shoulders, trust me, it is not praying. Marnie the Tender Herder. Too bad this doesn't give the creature trample. The fact that there's a rhino on the artwork, I thought the creature would have some sort of blocking bonus on it. So I think the art's a little bit misleading. Or the +1/+1 should have at least been +2/+2. Fire Blast. Probably one of the best cards out of this set, especially for red. 6 mana instant. You may sacrifice 2 mountains instead of paying Fire Blast casting cost. Fire Blast deals 4 damage to target creature or player. Ember Mages aren't well known for their diplomatic skills. I think this was one of my favorite red instants to use. It is a great late game card for red burn decks. You could kill your opponent very early. If you tap out all your mana, hit them with the ball lightning, hit them with your lightning bolts, hit them with your incinerates, and then all your mana is tapped now. You could still sacrifice your tap mountains and cast Fire Blast for free, doing an additional 4 damage. If you have 2 Fire Blasts in your hand and 4 mountains on the battlefield, sacrifice them all, do 8 damage to your opponent. A lot of times, your opponent's at less than 10 life by turn 4 if you have a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Reliable burn deck. I'm trying to think of another word for reliable. I can't think of it. Pretty much where you get the cards that you need almost every time. Sorry, I can't think of the word. It'll come back to me later. Probably when the stream's over. It doesn't matter though. Fire Blast is a great card. Firestorm Hellkite. 6 mana, 6/6 flying trample. However, it has a cumulative upkeep of a red and a blue. If it can scar the sky with fire, do not share its destination. Artwork's cool. I'm sure this thing feasts on elephants based on its size. It's not going to stick around for long though. Too bad it doesn't have haste, but I think if it did have haste, it would be too good. By the way, Fire Blast is my favorite card in the set so far. Flooded Shoreline. Cost 2 blue, pay 2 blue, return 2 islands you control to your hand to return target creature to its owner's hand. Some say the sea is jealous of the land and wishes to climb its heights to meet the sky. Fairy Tales. Kind of, I mean, the fact that you can return a creature at will, so to speak, as long as you have at least 2 islands out and 2 mana. But I think it's only good late game. Early game, you're not going to be able to afford to returning the 2 islands to your hand in order to return a creature. Oh, the word I was looking for was consistent for the red deck. If you have a consistent burn deck, Fire Blast, you need like 4 Fire Blasts in that deck to like help finish your opponent. Alright, enough about Fire Blast. Forbidden Ritual, 4 mana, sacrifice a card in play. Target opponent loses 2 life unless he or she sacrifices a permanent or discards a card. You may repeat this process as many times as you choose. I've never seen this card before. So you sacrifice a permanent, and then the opponent either sacrifices permanent or discards a card. Okay. Sacrifice a non-token permanent. Alright, so that is very important. So this card is less powerful. If you do, target opponent loses 2 life unless they sacrifice permanent or discard a card. You may repeat this process any number of times. Foreshadow. It's a creepy looking shadow. 2 mana, name a card, put the top card from target opponent's library into the graveyard. If that card was the named card, draw a card. And you get to draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Not really worth a slot in any deck, and to be perfectly honest. Freewind Falcon, 2 mana, 1/1 flying, protection from red. That does it. I'm going back to hunting chickens. Free Hawk, the Goblin Archer. These little goblins look funny. They couldn't hit the Falcon. Funeral Charm, choose 1. Target player chooses and discards a card, or target creature gets +2/-1 until end of turn, or target creature gains Swamp Walk until end of turn. I think this is one of the best charms, especially from the set, mainly because there are not many instant discard cards, for one, and this can kill creatures with 1 toughness, or pump up one of your creatures as long as they don't have 1 toughness. Options are always good, and this card has a lot to offer for that. Giant Caterpillar, 4 mana, 3/3. Pay a green, sacrifice the caterpillar to put a butterfly token onto the battlefield. Treat this token as a 1/1 green creature with flying. I've seen hornworms big as a man's fist, the traveler said, and nodded soberly when our jaws went slack at his ignorance. I just wish the butterfly, like, I guess you sacrifice power and toughness for flying, but I just think the butterfly should have at least been like a 2/2. I know butterflies aren't aggressive at all. Caterpillars are only aggressive just because they have to eat so much. I mean, they have like their defenses, whether it's poison, venom, or some caterpillars even do bite. But flavor-wise, it's pretty good. I just wish the butterfly was bigger than a 1/1. Goblin Recruiter, one of the most powerful goblin cards in the game for this reason. When Goblin Recruiter enters the battlefield, search your deck for any number of goblin cards, reveal those to all players, and then shuffle your library, then put the cards on top of your library in any order. Most of the time, if you're running Goblin Recruiter, you're going to be using a goblin deck. And being able to stack your deck however you like, you get to choose what goblins go on top of your library. You can even make it to guarantee that you're not going to be drawing any land anytime soon. Just stack the top of your decks with any goblins that you need. There are so many goblins in Magic now that they offer so many options. and finding the right goblin for the job. The goblin recruiters, you have to, if you want a good goblin deck, you need to run at least one copy of Goblin Recruiter. I cannot stress that enough. It's a keystone card in goblin decks. Goblin Swine Rider, 1/1 for 1 red. If Goblin Swine Rider is blocked, it deals 2 damage to each attacking creature and 2 damage to each blocking creature. May you get the mount you deserve, Sequata Curse. So if they do become blocked, then they're going to die themselves because they're going to be doing 2 damage to each attacking creature and each blocking creature. So, not really that good of a goblin to use. They're okay in less goblin strategies if you're not swarm attacking with a large army of fairly weak creatures at the time. I've never seen the card used, though. Gossamer Chains. It's an enchantment. Return Gossamer Chains to its owner's hand. Target unblocked creature deals no combat damage this turn. Hara swung his sword mightily, but still the air held him fast. Azawarai, Kenechi's Dream. I've never seen this card. It's good defensively, but that's all it's really good for. Griffin Canyon. Tap it to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You could tap it to untap target Griffin. That Griffin gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Where are falling feathers deadlier than falling rock? The 1000 questions. I guess if you're using a Griffin deck, this is a staple card you have. Since it's a land, it can't be countered. Therefore, it guarantees your Griffins to get buffed by +1/+1. Most Griffins are 2/2s for like 4 mana. So even with Griffin Canyon out, it's not really that big of a bonus. One good side to the Griffin Canyon, it's not a legendary land, so you can have 4 of them in your deck and out on the battlefield at once. Meaning that you can get more buffs with the +1/+1, making that a little bit better. Guiding Spirit, 3 mana, 1/2 flying. If the top card of target player's graveyard is a creature card, put that card on top of that player's library. This is could be good in a team game or a group game where you have political allies. And it's definitely good for yourself if you need a specific creature back from your graveyard. Or I shouldn't say if you need a specific, because it only looks at the top card of your library, so it does have its limits. Retainer of Eternal Sun, life flash again upon thy wings, song to the sun, the Fenrith song. Hearth Charm, choose one, destroy target artifact creature, or all attacking creatures get +1 power until end of turn, or target creature power 2 or less is unblockable this turn. I guess the best one would be all attacking creatures get +1 power for just 1 red mana. The other 2, I think, are just too situational. Heat Wave, 3 mana, cumulative upkeep of red. Blue creatures cannot block creatures you control. Non-blue creatures cannot block creatures you control unless their controller pays 1 life for each blocking creature. Speaking of Heat Wave, it's not even summer and we're already looking at 102-degree weather in Florida. That card's a color hoser for blue. Helm of Awakening, 2 mana. All spells cost 1 colorless mana less to cast. This little prize will cover your head and your spell, your bets, and your behind. Pashad Ibn Asim, the Sequata Trader. I've only seen this card used once, and it was in a group game. I think we had like 6 people, and someone was using an artifact deck. And because most artifacts are just colorless mana, Helm of Awakening helped them cast a lot of cards for free. It works for everybody, though, so you do have to be careful, because giving your opponent the ability to cast their stuff for less, too, could work against you. Honorable Passage, 2 mana instant. Prevent all damage to you or target creature from any one source. If that source is red, Honorable Passage deals to the source's controller an amount of damage equal to the amount of damage prevented. I've seen this card before, but I've never used it. If somebody uses Fire Blast on you, you can use Honorable Passage, preventing the damage, and then they take 4 instead. It'd be an insult to injury, especially if they sacrifice 2 mountains to cast it to do so. Hope Charm, the white charm of the set. Target creature gains first strike until end of turn, or target player gains 2 life, or destroy target local enchantment. I assume that's Aura. Yep. Hulking Cyclops, 5 mana, 5/5. Its drawback is he cannot block. Some say a great Cyclops turns the world in its hands, looking down upon it with one bright eye. I guess that would be the sun? 5 mana, 5/5. It's not good. I mean, it's not bad, but it's also not good since it can't block. Impulse. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on your bottom. And then you shuffle your library afterwards. Controlling time ensures you need never to look impulsive again. Good card draw. Infantry Veteran. I forgot about this card. 1/1 for 1 white. Tap him, target attacking creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. He looks like he got slashed across the face. He does have the Triangle of War tattooed or painted on his eye, though. The true dishonor for a soldier is surviving the war. Telentor. Infernal Harvest. 2 mana. Return X swamps you control to its owner's hand. Infernal Harvest deals X damage divided any way you choose among any number of target creatures. I offered you eternal life. I just didn't say where. Shaku the Endbringer. It's okay. It's like a last-ditch effort card because the more damage you want to deal, the more swamps you have to return to your hand. So if the this doesn't target the opponent either. Hey Jameson, you are absolutely correct. You got the soundtrack correct. Inspiration. For 4 mana, target player draws 2 cards. It's an instant. Madness and genius are separated only by degrees of success. Sardar Jabari. That is true. If somebody has a crazy idea, but they are that idea succeeds, they become a genius, like Albert Einstein. If they don't succeed in their endeavor, they are labeled a madman, so to speak. This is cool because target player, you can use this on your ally, on your teammate. It doesn't have to be you. Ironheart Chimera. This is the second of the 4 chimeras in the set. This one gives the chimera vigilance, and it has the same sacrifice ability. So from what we've seen, the Brass Talon was like the head of a lion with 2 long ostrich-like legs. This one looks to be more like the head of a metal dragon and a wagon wheel furnace-like body. It reminds me of the dragon tank from Chrono Trigger. Jamaran Lion, 3 mana, 3/1. For 1 white, tap him. Target creature cannot block this turn. The lion blinked. Ephemerif expression meaning situation avoided. It is aggressive. 3 mana, 3/1. Its 1 toughness really sets it back, though. Target creature cannot block this turn. It's good. But I see this used more as an attacker since it has 3 power for 3 mana, though. No problem. I'll let you know what they are afterwards. Jameson. Juju Bubble for 1 colorless, cumulative upkeep of 1. If you play a card, you have to sacrifice the Juju Bubble. You can pay 2 colorless mana to gain 1 life. If my heart had a lid, I would lift it to show you my joy. From Sequata Wedding Ceremony. You would have to have a lot of mana to get a lot of life out of the Juju Bubble. And it has a cumulative upkeep as well. So every turn, you have less mana to gain life with. On top of that, you can't play any other card while you have the bubble. I mean, you can, but then the bubble is destroyed. So it puts you in a bubble. Your opponent gets to do whatever they want, and all you're doing in the process is gaining life. Are you talking about the lion or the bubble? I don't remember the bubble, but I do remember the lion. Jungle Basin, that's the return of forest, and then you get a colorless and a green part of the cycle. Yep. I never used that lion specifically. I know I had it. I think you had it. Karvik Spite for 3 black. Sacrifice all permanents. Discard your hand. Target player loses 5 life. The end justifies the means. What do I care if I rule over the dead rather than over the living? The dead ask fewer questions. By Karvik. Karvik sacrificed everything to destroy. So if you can't kill your opponent with this, then you might as well be gone. You're correct, Jameson. I know Stronghold had the Heartstone, which reduces the activated abilities of cards by 1 colorless mana less, but it doesn't reduce it to less than 1. But that would make the card better. You are right. I've never seen Karvik Spite. Ugh. The fact that you have to sacrifice all permanents and discard your hand. You're left with nothing after that. You better hope that your opponent has 5 life or less and doesn't have any life gain when you use this card. I think it's way too risky. I've never seen it. Karoo is the white version of the return of untapped land, and then you get a colorless and a white back. I've never seen this card. Katabatic Winds, 3 mana, enchantment with phasing. Creatures with flying cannot attack, block, or use any abilities that require tapping them in activation cost. Wind will win whatever we wish. So every other turn, it pretty much stops creatures from flying, being able to do anything. That's interesting. I've never seen this card. It protects you every other turn, but sometimes just 1 turn is enough to turn the tide of battle. Keeper of Cuckoos. I remember this card. 1 mana, 1/1 red goblin. You can pay a red to give itself protection from red until end of turn. Wanted. Thick-skinned goblin for guarding mean old cuckoos. Must like fires and must heal quickly. I guess cuckoos must be pretty bad for the goblins to heal quickly. And they do call them mean old cuckoos. Him giving himself protection from red is useful if you have like Earthquake, which does the red card that does X damage to all creatures without flying in each player. If you pay a red, you can Earthquake for like 15 and the keeper won't take any damage because he'll have protection from that color. King Cheetah, 4 mana, 3/2. You may choose to play him at any time that you can play an instant, so it has flash. If you find yourself and a friend being chased by a King Cheetah, you have but 1 chance. Trip your friend. Oh, that's like the old joke if you're being chased by a bear or whatever. 4 mana is a little much for a 3/2, but it having flash, it could surprise the opponent. They attack with a 1/1, think you don't have anything on the battlefield. Flash in the cheetah, and you have a blocker that could take something down. Knight of the Mists. I remember this card. 3 mana, 2/2, flanking. When it enters the battlefield, pay a blue or destroy target knight. I wonder if that's reworded. Fear the Mists, for they are armed. Here's the rewording. When Knight of Mist enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 blue. If you don't, destroy target knight, and it can't be regenerated. Oh, so if there are no other knights on the battlefield, it will have to destroy itself if you don't pay the additional blue. However, if there are other knights on the battlefield, including your opponents, if you don't pay the blue, you can destroy that knight. You can use cards that change the creature type of target creature. You can change your opponent's creature type into a knight until end of turn, and then cast Knight of the Mist for 3, and you're able to destroy that creature. I did not realize that that card could do that back then. I just thought that the Knight of Mists, you needed 4 mana to keep it out on the battlefield at all times for a 2/2 flanker. So much better now that I understand it completely. I only used this card when I first started playing Magic. I never used it again once I got a grasp of the rules. Knight of Valor. 3 mana, 2/2 flanking. Pay a white and a colorless. Each creature without flanking blocking the Knight of Valor gets an additional -1/-1 until end of turn. You can only use this ability only once each turn. And the reason why I say additional is because he has flanking. Hey, Austin. Yeah, flanking. I don't think they're going to do that ability anymore. It was cool, though, because the idea of... Because it gave, like, the idea of creatures riding horses an advantage. If there's like a knight on a horse versus just a regular knight on the ground, the one on the horse would generally have the advantage. They have the high ground, so to speak, on a moving mount that just adds to more power that they have. But eventually they stopped doing that. Here's Kukis, the 5 mana Djinn. He's a 3/5. During your upkeep, if you do not control at least one keeper of Kukus, that's the goblin we saw a few minutes ago, Kukis deals 3 damage to you and must attack this turn. And he has the fire breathing ability where you pay for each 1 red you pay, he gets +1 power until end of turn. He has trample, so these two work hand in hand. And here's a Keeper of Kukus in the artwork. So Kukus must have these goblins who serve him, and if he doesn't have any of them out, then he takes his fiery wrath upon you, its controller. He's definitely a powerful... Is he legendary? No, he is not legendary. Kisku Drake. 4 mana, 2/2 flying. You can pay a green to give him +1 toughness until end of turn. You cannot spend more than 1 greed in this way each turn. I should just say you can only use this ability only once each turn. You can sacrifice Kisku and Spitting Drake to search your library for a Beashevan Dragon and put it on the battlefield. Shuffle your library afterwards. Oh, so it's another card that's kind of like Spirit of the Night, where you have 2 in play and then you sacrifice them to build a bigger, better creature. Leadbelly Chimera. This one looks more like a metallic ox rhino. This one will give the Chimera trample. Yep. Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't think Yu-Gi-Oh! Was around. I don't think Yu-Gi-Oh! When did Yu-Gi-Oh! Come out? Because this set came out in 1996, 1997. I'm looking it up real quick. Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't come out in Japan until 1999, and it hit America in 2002. Lycanthrope. 5 mana, 5/5. For each 1 damage dealt to it, it gets a -1/-1 counter on it instead. During your upkeep, remove 1 of these -1/-1 counters from Lycanthrope. So 5 mana 5/5 is good. The fact that it gets weaker as it takes damage is pretty cool. And it can slowly regenerate back to its normal power and toughness. If you have a way of putting +1/+1 counters on it, then you can kind of mitigate the -1/-1 counters that it gets, making it a bigger threat. What's this? Plant fungus. I figured it had been changed into some sort of fungus or plant something. Lightning Cloud. This almost looks like a jellyfish. 4 mana enchantment. Pay a red. Lightning Cloud deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Use this ability only when a red spell is successfully cast and only once for each spell. Excuse me. The mightiest clouds sit upon spires of fire. This is a little way to get in extra damage per burn spell. It is. I don't think it's worth it though because it costs 4 mana. A lot of your red burn spells want to be 3 or less, with the exception of Fire Blast, since most of the time you're going to sacrifice mountains to cast Fire Blast instead of paying the 6 mana. I don't think I'm ever going to stop talking about Fire Blast, which is still my favorite card in the set. Longbow Archer, 2 mana 2/2 first strike. It can block creatures with flying. It's definitely going to hold back this dragon. If it bears wings, I will pin it to the skies over Tefamburu from Ruya the Zalfrin Archer. I do remember this card. Magma Mine. I remember this card. For 1 colorless, pay 4, put a pressure counter on Magma Mine. The fact that it doesn't tap is pretty good for it, with putting the pressure counters on it. Tap it, sacrifice it. For each pressure counter on it, Magma Mine deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So I used this card a bit. I gave myself like all these artifacts that just tap for a bunch of mana. Then I think I had walls to protect my life and then to block creatures with. And then once I had enough counters on the mine, if I had to use it on a creature to live, I would. But most of the time, I wanted my Magma Mine to hit the opponent. Yes, Jameson is correct. Would grow great with Green's mana ramping. I had the Elf Fireball deck, and I think I had 1 Magma Mine in it just as an alternate win condition in case my Fireball or my Lava Burst didn't kill the opponent. Next. Oops. Misclick. Oh, the flavor text is boom. I thought that was pretty funny. In all caps. Boom! Mana War, 3 mana 2/2 jellyfish. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature to its owner's hand. Pretty good. Blue would get a lot of creatures with the same ability, and it would get renamed over the years. Blue does great at putting something on your side of the field while removing something on the opponent's side of the field. Although it doesn't kill the creature, it only returns it to its owner's hand. You could return your own creature to your hand if you want. That is an option. But most of the time, Mana War would be used aggressively against your opponent. There are other ways to return your own creatures to your hand. Beautiful artwork on it. I've never seen this card. Matopi Golem. 5 mana, 3/3. Pay 1 to regenerate it, but then it gets a -1/-1 counter on it. Not so good. Some pot makers claim to use the mud of such creatures to make their finest bowls, and then that the bowls scream when fired. That's pretty dormant. Morbid. No, not dormant. Morbid. Miraculous Recovery. 5 mana instant. Put target creature card from your graveyard into the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Treat this token as though it were just played. You stop breathing for just a few minutes and everyone jumps to conclusions. Zarku the Necrosavant. Black is the number one color to bring creatures back from the dead, but white is probably the second color to be able to do so. And then I know green can do that as well. Red and blue don't really have graveyard recursion for creatures. They can bring their instants and sorceries back and artifacts too. But black, green, and red, or excuse me, black, white, and green are the best with reviving their creatures. Mob Mentality. I forgot about this card, but I remember it now. For 1 red, enchanted creature gets trample. If all non-wall creatures you control attack this turn, enchanted creature gets power plus X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Why is Loud Stupidity so infectious? From Rana the Sequata Market Fool. This would go good in Goblins or any deck that has a bunch of little creatures out. But you do have to attack with everything in order for the ability to trigger. Mortal Wound. Oh, this poor possum or rodent got mauled by this hound. Oh, this was in the Mirage card, Natural Selection. This was the exact artwork. This creature was chasing 2 rodents, and this card is a continuation of it. He caught the rodent and is ripping it apart. Very gory fashion. So for 1 green, if damage is dealt to enchanted creature, destroy it. Their tears spill over Jamora. Mixed with blood, they wash everything red. Love Song of Night and Day. So put this on your opponent's creature, and if they take 1 damage, then the creature dies. Good if you have ways to deal direct damage to the creature, like pingers. If the creature blocks or becomes blocked by something that does at least 1 damage, then that also will kill it. It's a slow green removal card. Mundungu. 3 mana, 1/1, black, blue. Tap them to counter target spell unless the spell's controller pays an additional 1 colorless and 1 life. Plays the ability as an interrupt. Our buried kings silently await the revolt of dead peasants. Tuali, the Mundungu of Aku. Interesting counterspelling wizard. It's not often where the opponent has to pay life to keep their spells from being countered. Mystic Veil. For 2 mana, you may choose to play Mystic Veil as an instant. If you do, sacrifice it at the end of the turn. Enchanted creature cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Magic is my thread, my will the needle. I weave over you as if you never were. Poetics of Hanan. Natural Order. 4 mana. Looks like this leopard killed this chimpanzee. Sacrifice a green creature. Search your library for a green creature card and put it onto the battlefield. Shuffle your library afterwards. But the price of Mangar's freedom was Azmira's life. So Mangara was freed from the prison, as I mentioned earlier in the story, but Azmira sacrificed her life to do so. This is a really powerful card. You can sacrifice one of your little 1/1 mana making elves to search for any green creature in your deck and put it on the battlefield. So if you have a bunch of creatures that tap for mana, let's say in the first turn you play Llanowar Elf, on your second turn you play 2 more Llanowar Elves, on your third turn you can cast Natural Order, sacrificing one of those Llanowar Elves, and you can put out any creature with green in its mana cost. That includes 5-color creatures that have green in the cost. I know there's like 13/13s with trample, 15/15 indestructible green creatures. Natural Order is one of the best cards, I think, to be able to search your library for any creature. And the creature stays on the battlefield. It doesn't go back to your hand. You don't lose life equal to its power. The creature isn't put back anywhere else. It stays on the battlefield until either the game's over or it is somehow killed by your opponent. Probably one of the most powerful cards in this set. And the original cost for it would run you roughly $20. Necromancy for 3 mana. It's an enchantment. You can choose to play it as an instant. If you do, sacrifice it at the end of the turn. When you play Necromancy, choose target creature card in any graveyard. When Necromancy enters the battlefield, put that creature into play as though it were just summoned. Necromancy becomes a creature enchantment that is put onto the targeted creature. If Necromancy leaves play, sacrifice the creature. It's a weird graveyard revival spell. But you can also target your opponent's graveyard and steal one of their creatures. Necrosavant. 6 mana, 5/5. Is he a giant? Yeah, zombie giant. For 5 mana, sacrifice a creature. Put Necrosavant onto the battlefield. Use his ability only during your upkeep and only if Necrosavant is in your graveyard. I remember my first death. Zarku the Necrosavant. I guess Necrosavants are like the African form of liches. We can see a lot of spell books and phylacteries in the background of... unless this is a coffin. I'm not entirely sure. And the fact that it's a giant, too, that's interesting. I did have this card. I did use this card for... I don't remember any success stories with it. But it's a good late game creature. If you draw like a weaker creature that's not going to do any good for you in the late game, as long as it's during your upkeep, you can pay 5 mana, sacrifice a creature, and get this 5/5 back onto the battlefield. Necrotal. 4 mana, 2/1 first strike. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. So it's good against all other colors. I have seen the horrors Karvik has freed. My betrayal is certain, but of Karvik or of Jamara, I cannot say. That's Jolrael realizing her mistake when she allied with Karvik to overpower Mangara. Yeah, Necrosavant was hard to get rid of back in the day. He's much easier to deal with now. Ogre Enforcer, 5 mana, 4/4. Ogre Enforcer cannot be destroyed by lethal damage unless a single source deals enough damage to destroy it. Ate up all of his siblings in his first week. A good beginning for one destined to be in command. Suka the Ogre Matron. So this means that only one thing could destroy this creature if the damage is dealt at once. If 2/2/2 creatures block the Enforcer, it's not going to deal lethal damage to the Enforcer. Under normal circumstances, both 2/2s would do 4 damage to the Enforcer, and then they would all die. But in this case, the Enforcer has a special ability where it can only be killed by one source that deals the 4 damage. Fire Blast can kill it. But if Lightning Bolt hits it and then a 1/1 blocks it, it'll still live. There I go mentioning Fire Blast again. I don't know of any other cards with this ability. I don't think I've ever seen Ogre Enforcer to begin with. So it's definitely a unique ability in Magic. And that's hard to find nowadays because Magic, I do believe, is running out of ideas. And they recycle a lot of cards or remake them with different names. And then they change the casting cost, the creature type, the power and toughness. And there's only so much they can do. But they're still going strong. Avenomancer, 3 mana, 0/1. When Avenomancer comes into play, return 3 basic lands you control to your hand or sacrifice Avenomancer. Tap him, return him to your hand, destroy target creature, and put a sheep token onto the battlefield. Treat this token as a 0/1 green creature. Oh, the creature's controller puts the token on the battlefield. So in essence, you're turning a creature into a sheep. And that's what the artwork on the card is. This was a soldier, and the wizard snapped his fingers, And to this soldier's surprise, he is now a sheep, and the rest of his cavalry is behind. Probably their fate will be the same. Panther Warriors. One of my cat's name is Panther. 5 mana, 6/3. When you run, you're graceful and swift, sleek as a powerful panther. Love Song of Night and Day. Normally, I don't care for creatures with no abilities, but 5 mana, 6/3. Their power is larger than their casting cost. They're really good if the opponent doesn't have anything to block with. But other than that, they're just a generic creature. Parapet. 2 mana. You may choose to play it as an instant. If you do, sacrifice it at the end of the turn. All creatures you control get +1 to their toughness. Good with wall strategies. There is no wall that can't be improved by making it taller. Peace Talks. I don't think I've ever seen this card. During this turn and the next one, players cannot attack and cannot play spells or abilities that target any permanent or player. By the tongues of 1,000 serpents, this time I do not lie. Amizulkin, the Sequata diplomat. So here they're ending the Triangle of War and laying down their swords. Phyrexian Marauder. It costs X mana and enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. However, it cannot block, and also it cannot attack unless you pay 1 mana for each +1/+1 counter on it, making it an absolute bad creature to use. You have to really have access to a lot of mana to get the most out of this card. The artwork is alright. It kind of looks like a somewhat assembled Chimera, but it's a Phyrexian. Phyrexian Walker. Now, Phyrexian Walker is way, way better than the Marauder. It doesn't cost anything to cast. It's a 0/3. It's not going to deal any damage by itself. It has 0 attack. But it's a great early game artifact creature that's going to be able to block for you and live for at least the first couple of turns. I've heard terrible tales of black rains, ashen fields, and metal that screams. I have consoled myself that the tales were a myth of some fevered mind, but today I saw a walker, and now I fear the truth. Kasib Ibn Naji letters. So the Phyrexians have begun their invasion on Dominaria as a whole. Unfortunately, most of the denizens of Jamara were too busy during the Triangle of War to notice the Phyrexians beginning their invasion of the land. Pillar Tombs of Aku, 4 mana. During each player's upkeep, that player must sacrifice a creature, or they lose 5 life, and then the Pillar of Tombs is destroyed. Aku, City of Hidden Graves. Aku, City of Lost Kings. Aku, Welcome Me. The Pillar Tomb inscription. So once a player runs out of creatures to sacrifice, they lose 5 life. It's almost like a game of hot potato. First person to not have any creatures on the battlefield. That's when it goes awry. Next page. Prosperity. Pay a blue and X. Each player draws X cards. Wealth is a good thing compared to poverty. Your food is better, your robes are softer, and your companions have bathed more recently. Kip Kemboy, the Kukamasa Pirate. The fact that each player draws X cards, so you're helping out all other players in the game as well. This could be used to your advantage if you have cards that... I know there are a few that punish your opponent for drawing cards. Underworld Dreams is one of them. When your opponent draws a card, they take 1 damage for each card they draw. So Prosperity is a good combo with Underworld Dreams. I think, if I remember correctly, there's a card called Mind's Eye. Whenever the opponent draws a card, you may draw a card as well, so you'll draw double the cards. Just be careful you don't mill yourself out. Pygmy Hippo, 2/2. If Pygmy Hippo attacks and is not blocked, you may choose to have it not deal any damage this turn. If you do, the defending player taps all of their land and empties their mana pool. After combat, add an equal amount of colorless mana that was drained to your mana pool. The fact that it's colorless kind of limits what you can do with it. You would have to have some colored mana open to really get a bang for your buck. I like the artwork though, cute little hippo. Python, 3 mana, 3/2. How can you claim the gods are merciless when they rob the snake of its limbs to give other creatures a sporting chance? Hakeem the Lore Weaver. The artwork is great. I love snakes. Snakes are my favorite animal. Fortunately, the python is just a generic creature. It doesn't have any abilities. It's got a good power for its casting cost. Its toughness is lacking, though. Quicksand. It's a land that taps for a colorless, or you can tap and sacrifice it. Target attacking creature without flying gets -1, -2 until end of turn. Boy, this poor soul drowned in the quicksand. Quirion Druid, 3 mana, 1/2. Pay a green and tap it. Target land becomes a 2/2 green creature permanently. The creature still counts as a land. The land has been gracious enough to let you tread upon her for years. That privilege is about to end. From Lifelin, the Quirion Exarch. Decent animate land, albeit 1 a turn, but you could use it on your opponent's lands if you have a way to like destroy target creature or deal 2 damage to target creature. Quirion Ranger, an elf for 1 green. Return a forest you control to your hand. Untap target creature. Use this ability only once each turn. Respect the earth, for it will one day be your shield and another day your blanket. Lifelin, the Quirion Exarch. Lifelin has some good quotes. This is good for creatures that tap for mana, especially if they tap for more than 1 mana. You can get more mana out of them at the cost of returning a forest to your hand. Raging Gorilla, 3 mana, 2/3. If Raging Gorilla blocks or is blocked, it gets +2, -2 until end of turn. So that would make it a 4/1 for 3 if it becomes blocked. But every temper tantrum makes another angry gorilla. Ephemeris Child's Myth. Yeah, it's okay. Not the best. Rainbow Efreet, 4 mana, 3/1 flying. You can pay 2 blue to phase it out. A beauty made more so by its fleeting visitations. This was a strong tournament card because it was hard to get rid of. If the opponent wanted to target it with a spell, if the owner had 2 blue mana out, they could pay it and the Rainbow Efreet would phase out of existence, protecting it from harm. It could also use that for blocking. It could block a creature, then phase out before receiving any damage, and the creature would still be considered blocked. It would phase back in on the owner's following turn, meaning that it would be able to attack and everything as normal. Relentless Assault, for 4 mana, untap all creatures that attack this turn. You may declare an additional attack during your main phase this turn. Flog and Squee, up the tree, see the army flee, flee, flee. Goblin Nursery Rhyme Warcry. Giving yourself an additional combat phase is a very strong move in the game because your opponent most of the time is going to exhaust all their resources surviving the first combat phase. If they don't see a second combat phase coming, they're most likely going to not have any defenses for the second wave. And any creatures they survived the first time that blocked will still retain damage from what they blocked. So most of the time they won't survive the second onslaught after blocking again. Relic Ward, 2 mana. You can choose to play it as an instant. If you do, sacrifice it at the end of the turn. It goes on to an artifact, and the artifact cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Asmira's prayer alone should have freed Mangara from the Amber Prison. Remedy: for 2 mana, prevent up to 5 damage total to any number of creatures and or players. These things will protect you while I'm gone, remind you of my love for you. Love song of night and day. Resistance Fighter: for 1 white. Sacrifice him. Target creature deals no combat damage this turn. My soldiers fought without hesitation, died without doubt. I don't know, this is some sort of weird zombie or Phyrexian or assassin or something. This Resistance Fighter's got to sacrifice himself to take him out. Retribution of the Meek: destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. I didn't know this card existed. Tread upon the meek, and they shall wound your feet and make you crawl. Asmira the Holy Avenger. It's like this dragon was plaguing these people, but they cast a spell, and the sun itself set this dragon ablaze. Righteous Aura: it's an enchantment for 2. Pay a white and 2 life to prevent all damage to you from any one source. This card could combo with the Crypt Rats, as I mentioned earlier. Good is not a thing. You cannot neither touch it or own it. No, good is a vision we all share and strive to make real. Asmira the Holy Avenger. Righteous War: for 3 mana, all white creatures you control gain protection from black, and all black creatures you control gain protection from white. This is a war without neutrality. Asmira the Holy Avenger. Interesting card. River Boa: 2 mana, 2/1 Island Walk, and it can regenerate for 1 green. But no one heard the snake's gentle hiss for peace over the elephant's trumpeting of war. Afari Tales. Finally, I know I said Fire Blast was my favorite from the card, but I'm going to have to choose River Boa over Fire Blast for a variety of reasons. Number 1 reason: it's a really good card. It has so much to offer. It only costs 2 mana. It has 2 power. Its 1 toughness is almost irrelevant due to the fact that it can regenerate for only 1 green. And it also has Island Walk, so against blue, it's unblockable. Nowadays, though, creature regeneration, there are a lot more answers to them. And there are a lot of ways to put -1/-1 counters on creatures to just straight up exile creatures. So creatures with regeneration aren't as tough as they were back in the day. And lastly, the artwork for River Boa, which it almost looks like more like an anaconda, is extremely beautiful. There's so much going on in the entire picture. The boa's descending from a tree limb into the water, taking a dip. The water's dripping off its serpentine body. There's birds flying in the background. This card appeals to almost all my senses. I could see it moving in my head. I could hear the sounds of the water, of the birds, of the jungle. River Boa, definitely one of my favorite cards in the set. And I'm going to 99% say that River Boa is going to be my favorite card from the set. Rock Slide. Red and X. Made my first color mistake of the stream. Rock Slide deals X damage divided any way you choose among any number of target attacking or blocking creatures without flying. Good old Rock. Nothing beats Rock. Warhark the Goblin Archer. Poor man's Earthquake. It doesn't hit all players, which could be a big difference if your life total is less than your opponent. Rowan for 4 mana. It's an enchantment. During your draw step, reveal the first card you draw to all players. If the card is a basic land, put it into your hand. And then you'll be able to draw your card for the turn afterwards. I've dreamt of a second harvest, but fear I will not see it. From Asmira. Sands of Time. For 4 mana, each player skips his or her next untap step. At the beginning of each player's turn, untap each tapped artifact, creature, and land they control, and then tap each untapped artifact, creature, or land they control. Holy crap, that card's gonna be annoying. But once, with a magician's help, time was stopped and day stood still. Love Song of Night and Day. That essentially means half of the cards that are tapped when this card is played will be, or all the cards that are tapped when this card is played will be untapped on the next turn. Anything not tapped will be tapped, and it's just going to keep going back and forth as long as Sands of Time is on the battlefield. Scalebane's Elite. 5 mana, 4/4, protection from black. With Rashida's Blades, My Guiding Vision, and the Luck of the Blessed, today we will free Mangara as Mirror the Holy Avenger. Good against black. Shimmering Efreet. 3 mana, 2/2, flying and phasing. When Shimmering Efreet phases out, target creature also phases out. Life or Death, which is the illusion. Naima the Ephemera Philosopher. I did forget about this card. I owned it, but I forgot about it. Shrieking Drake. 1 mana, 1/1 blue. I know Jameson had this card. It has flying. When it enters the battlefield, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. Karvik believes the Drake's cries herald of his victory. In truth, they mourn aloud from his impending demise. Teferi. It's a 1 mana, 1/1 flyer with a drawback, and the drawback is if it's the only creature on the battlefield, it's just going to return itself. You have to have another creature out to return. It is good if you have a creature with enter the battlefield effects, or if you have like when target creature enters the battlefield, this happens. The Drake can keep returning itself each time you cast it. But other than that, not so good by today's standards. Samoon, a red and a green, deals 1 damage to each creature target opponent controls. The black and white sacred monkeys hold her children to her and waits. Love Song of Night and Day. I guess it's good against like small creature strategies. Sisay's Ring. This is Captain Sisay's Ring. For 4 mana, tap it, add 2 colors, mana to your mana pool, play a still is a mana source. It's a slower way of getting mana. There are a lot better mana sources out there nowadays. But for its time, it was decent if you had a heavy spell. With this ring, you have friends in the worlds you've never heard of. And this would be illusion because Sisay would end up making more friends along the way. We would meet them all starting in the next set. Snake Basket. Ooh, this card looks cool. I love Cobras. I've never seen it though. River Cobra is still going to be number 1. For 4 mana, you pay X, sacrifice it, put X Cobra tokens onto the battlefield. Treat these tokens as 1/1 green snakes. Too bad they don't have the whole poison ability. That would have been cool. Does anyone have a flute? Ranos the Quad Market Fool. That's funny. I do like these Cobras. Solfatara. For 3 mana, target player cannot play any lands this turn. Draw a card at the beginning of your next turn. Well, this will set your opponent back by 1 turn. A burst of hot air tossed the moon into the air, and the moon liked it up there so much it never needed the ground again. Azawari, the Glitter Moon. Song of Blood, I forgot this card. The artwork on this card is of Paraj of Urborg, the Panther Warrior Assassin. 2 mana, put the top 4 cards from your library into your graveyard. For each creature that was put in this way, all creatures that attack this turn get +1 power. It's a risky card because it could be that you put 4 lands or 4 non-creature cards and then the card does nothing. Then you lost the top 4 cards of your library for nothing as well. I forgot about this card too. Spider Climb for 1 green. You may choose to cast it as an instant. If you do, sacrifice it at the end of your turn. Enchanted creature gets +3 toughness and can block creatures with flying. I'm not sure what these things down here are, but this lady was able to avoid them by having her hands become like spider limbs, and she could climb this tree. Spitting Drake. Oh, this was the second piece needed for the Viashivan Dragon. Spitting Drake and Kisku Drake. 4-mana 2/2 flying. It has fire breathing, but it could only be used once each turn. It prefers its meals cooked. In the artwork, the Drake is spitting at this. It looks like a hound that's trying to run away. Squandered Resources. For a black and a green. Sacrifice a land, add to your mana pool 1 mana of any type that the sacrificed land could produce. Play this ability as a mana source. So you can tap the land for mana and then sacrifice it for an additional mana. He traded sand for skins, skins for gold, gold for life. In the end, he traded life for sand. That makes sense. It's a poor man's way if you're desperate to make mana. Stampeding Wildebeests, 4 mana, 5/4 trample. That's really good. During your upkeep, return a green creature you control to its owner's hand. There's the drawback. Prayers for rain are answered with the thunder of hooves. But like with any drawback with the returning a creature to your hand, you can use it to your advantage with enter or leave the battlefield effects. Solomon's Legacy, white and a red. When it enters the battlefield, destroy all djinns and Afrits. Whenever a djinn or Afrit enters the battlefield, destroy it. With Suleiman's ascension to power, the djinn and Afrits of ancient Rabia learned humility. With so many djinns and Afrits in the Mirage and Vision sets, I don't know if a lot of people use them regularly. I know I didn't back in the day. This is a good way to stop those cards from being used. You can use this card in combo with cards that change the text of creature types. You could have it say destroy all goblins or merfolk or elves with those comboed cards, making it pretty powerful. Summer Bloom for 2 green or green and colors. You may play up to 3 additional lands this turn. So that means you could play 4 lands in the turn, which could be really powerful. On turn 2, you could have 5 lands on the battlefield. That is such a crazy land ramp. Our love is like the river in the summer season of long rains. For a little while it spilled its banks, flooding the crops in the fields. Love song of night and day. Sun Clasp. Is this something the Necrosavant wore? Enchanted creature gets +1/+3. You can pay a white to return the enchanted creature to its owner's hand. And darkness shall be cast from me, for my soul resides in the sun. Oh, I forgot about Sequata Assassin. He's poisoning this pig roast. It's a 1/1 and cannot be blocked except by artifact and black creatures. If it attacks and is not blocked, the defending player gets a poison counter. And as a rule, if any player has 10 or more poison counters, they lose the game. I do remember I did have a poison deck with the swamp mosquitoes and pit scorpions and saber-toothed cobras and crypt cobra. Oh, crypt cobra was my favorite Mirage card, so it's going to be another snake in Visions. The River Boa. Sequata Lancer, 3 mana 2/2 with haste and flanking. Never stop till you see your lance come out the other side. Advice from Telem Tor. Tallroom Champion, 5 mana 3/3 Minotaur. He has first strike. If he blocks or is blocked by any creature, that creature loses first strike until end of turn. In the Tallroom language, there is no word for surprised. One of the better Minotaur, but overall Minotaur are, I think, one of the weaker creature tribes in Magic as a whole. Tallroom Piper, 5 mana 3/3. All creatures with flying able to block him do so. When the Tallroom began to play, the dragons fell from the sky to squash the obnoxious noise. In the artwork, the Tallroom Piper is playing his Didgeridoo. It's one of those like Australian Aboriginal like flutes. They go like, and that's what the piper's playing. And here's a dragon coming from the sky to get rid of the noise, as the flavor text says. Tar Pit Warrior, I forgot about this card. 3 mana, 3/4 Cyclops. If he's the target of a spell or ability, he is destroyed. So that's his drawback, even though he's 3 mana for a 3/4. But the opponent can use a spell that says prevent 1 damage to target creature, then that would kill the warrior. The Cyclops shrugged off savage blows, but casual insults made him weep. As were the Cyclops who couldn't. That's funny. Teferi's Honor Guard. 3 mana, 2/2 flanking. It could also phase out at will. They may seem ceremonial, but their swords are still sharp. Kipi Kemboy, the Kukamasa Pirate. I do believe we have 2 more pages to go. Here's Teferi's Puzzle Box, one of the most interesting and somewhat powerful combo cards, especially for group games. During each player's draw step, that player puts the cards in their hand on the bottom of their library and draws that many cards. And then you draw your additional card for the turn. It's powerful in, when I mentioned prosperity, cards that punish your opponent for drawing cards, as well as rewarding you at the same time. And players can't hold on to certain cards for the next turn either. They lose whatever's in their hand and draw a new hand. Teferi's Realm. I've never seen this card. For 3 mana, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player chooses artifacts, creatures, lands, or non-aura enchantments. All cards of that type phase out. Fire is dead. Water has killed him, from the Stories of Nature. Phasing is definitely chaotic, and I could see why they stopped playing cards with, why they stopped phasing as an ability. Tempest Drake, 3 mana 2/2 with Vigilance. Its speed will be equaled only by the swiftness of my enemy's fall. From Karvik. Decent card. 3 Wishes. I don't think I've ever seen this card. For 3, take the top 3 cards from your library, look at them, and set them aside face down. You may play those cards as though they were in your hand. At the beginning of your next turn, just sacrifice any of those cards that were not played. Well, you better make sure you have the mana to cast everything. Time and Tide. For 2 blue, all creatures that are phased out phase in, and all creatures with phasing phase out. Time may heal all wounds, but what heals time? Teferi. Tin Wing Chimera. It's the 4th Chimera. This is a winged cobra, metallic cobra, and it gives the sacrifice target flying. Tithe. For 1 white, search your library for a plains. If you have less lands than target opponent, you can search your library for an additional plains. Reveal those cards to all players and put them in your hand. Shuffle your library afterwards. Situational mana ramp for white. It's still good, especially if you did not go first. This card rewards you for going second, because your opponent will always have, if they played a land every turn, your opponent will always have more land than you at the time of the beginning of your turn. Tremor. For 1 red, deal 1 damage to each creature without flying. Where do you run when the earth becomes your enemy? Naima, the Ephemerith Philosopher. Here's the Triangle of War. For 1 colorless, pay 2, sacrifice it, choose target creature you control and target creature an opponent controls. Each creature deals damage of its power to each other, so target creature fights target creature. The Zalfrin War Triangle represents Trinity of Might, Faith, and Guile. Uktabi Orangutan. 3 mana 2/2. When Uktabi Orangutan comes into play, destroy a target artifact. Is it true that the apes wear furs of gold when they marry? Rana's and Sequata Market Fool. This card has gained some infamy, mainly for its artwork, because people say that these two monkeys are doing the nasty. It's also a good card for 3 mana, 2/2 to destroy target artifact. But I think the card got its most notoriety from the artwork. Undiscovered Paradise. I owned this card, and it was in my first 5-color deck. I think Slivers. Tap it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. At the beginning of your next turn, return Undiscovered Paradise to your hand. So using it will make you have a land go back to your hand. Itself, it goes back to your hand. So if you keep casting it and using it, you'll never be able to have more land out than you have at the time. So it is situational, but it is really good in 5-color decks if you don't have other ways of getting mana of any color. Undo. For 3, return 2 target creatures to its owner's hand. Oft have I wished to undo past deeds, but never did I imagine they would be undone for me. Nema, the Ephemera Philosopher. Most likely talking about Teferi changing the past. It's a pretty good card. 1 spell, taking care of 2 creatures temporarily is pretty strong. Urborg Mindsucker. I forgot about this card. 3 mana, 2/2. Pay a black and sacrifice it. Target opponent discards a card at random. Play this ability as a sorcery only during your turn. My pet will pick the ripe fruit from your tortured brain as if it were hanging from a vine. It's definitely a horror. Yep, they changed the creature type to horror. I would definitely not want to wake up to this thing. I've actually had a nightmare of something that didn't have any eyes, but like a long tongue, and it would like go at my feet. It's weird. Just a weird nightmare. Vampiric Tutor. Oh, another power card from the Vision set. For a black, pay 2 life, search your library for any card, shuffle your library, and then put that card on top of your deck. I write upon clean white parchment with a sharp quill in the blood of my students, divining their secrets. Shaku the Endbringer. Let's see. How much is Vampiric Tutor worth nowadays? The original is roughly $45. Vampirism. This is a cool looking card. The artwork's great. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn. Vampirism enters the battlefield. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control. However, all other creatures you control get -1/-1 time to turn. The artwork is much better than the card. That's all I have to say that it has going for it. Vanishing. For 1 blue, and put on a creature. Then you pay 2 blue, enchanted creature phases out. Careless like a child with fire, so I was with time. You could pretty much put this on your opponent's creature and constantly make the creature phase out, so it's never going to do anything in the game. Or you could put it on one of your creatures, giving them defensively the ability to block and survive battle and combat, just like it shows here. This warrior went to slash him, but this guy faded out of existence, so he was unharmed by the slash. Ooh, this was a close card to be better than the River Boa, in my opinion, but River Boa is still going to remain on top. Viashino Sandstalker, 3 mana, 4/2. It has haste. At the end of any turn, returns the Sandstalker to its owner's hand from the battlefield. Some believe Sandstalkers to be illusions. Those with scars know better. The Viashino are the lizard people, the Argonian of the Magic world. This was a powerful card too. The fact that it goes back to your hand every turn means that if the opponent didn't have an answer for it now and then, it would pretty much hit for 4, which was good for just 3 mana. And on the artwork, the Sandstalker, I assume, slashed and killed this tribal scout You can see a slash right here, and then blood's coming from him as he's falling. And the rest of his tribe does not want any part of this Sandstalker. Here's the Viashivan Dragon, the search card for the two drakes. You combine the red and the green drake to make this. It's a 4/4. Otherwise, it costs 6. It has flying, and it has a combination of those formerly drakes, the Kisku drakes +1 toughness, but it can use it any amount of times, and the Spitting drake's fire breathing that it can use any amount of times. The Viashivan understand that cruelty arises from opportunity. I'm not a big fan of Ian Miller's work. A lot of his art kind of resembles like the original bestiary that you would see, like coat of arms style art from the UK or wherever the bestiary was first invented. Vision Charm. For 1 blue, target artifact phases out, or put the top 4 cards from target player's library into their graveyard, or all lands of one type are basic lands of your choice until end of turn. I mainly use this card to mill 4 cards from the top of my opponent's deck. Wake of Vultures. 4 mana, 3/1 flying. You can pay 2 and sacrifice a creature to regenerate them. These vultures are waiting for this poor soul to die so they can feast on him. So the vulture said to the griffin, "You gonna eat that?" Azawari, the ugly bird. Reminds me of Jungle Book. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Now we're on the last page of Visions. Wand of Denial. For 2 mana, tap it, look at the top card of target opponent's library or target player's library. If that card is a non-land card, you may pay 2 life to put it into that player's graveyard. You'll never miss what you never had. Pretty cool deck manipulator card. Helps with mill strategies and getting rid of a potential threat before the opponent is able to draw it and cast it. Warrior's Honor. For 3 mana, all creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. We are to be bound together as the reeds of a basket. As Mira, Rashida, and Jabari, the Unity chant. Here's a Warthog. I know I said Meerkat was in the Mirage set. Here's Pumbaa, the Warthog. 3 mana, 3/2, just like the Python, except Warthog's better than the Python because he has an ability, Swamp Walk. So against black, he is unblockable. Too much work. It takes a long time to break them in and more than a few recruits. Greebog, the Goblin Swine Rider. Waterspout Djinn. 4 mana, 4/4 flying. During your upkeep, return an untapped island you control to its owner's hand or sacrifice the Djinn. Fly us higher out of its storm. Sisay of the Weatherlight. Wicked Reward. I don't know what the head is this, if this was the head of a dragon or not. 2 mana, instant. Sacrifice a creature. Target creature gets +4/+2 until end of turn. I don't think it's a good card at all. Not really. The blood on my hands is merely proof of my ambition. I'm Karvik. Wind Shear. Oh, this poor Drake is just getting like torn up in the wind. All attacking creatures with flying get -2/-2 and lose flying until end of turn. That's really good against flying. As the winds abated, there was a shower of dragon scales, then nothing more. Azawari, the Unruly Wind. Zalfin Crusader. 3 mana, 2/2, knight with flanking. You can pay a white and a colorless. Redirect 1 damage from the Crusader to target creature or player. War is the crucible of leadership. So if you have enough mana open, all damage done to the Crusader can be thrown back to the opponent, which is a really powerful ability. And this concludes the Visions episode of Magic the Conversation. I'm going to click back to Riverboa. I know he's on here somewhere. Slithered me timbers. There he is. That's my beautiful boy. I know Riverboa will be reprinted in a few sets down the line, but it would never get this beautiful artwork that Steve White has blessed my eyes with. Riverboa, I know once I go through all the sets, I will rank which of each card. I will pick one card from each set, and then I will rank those cards to find out what my ultimate favorite is. But I know Riverboa would probably make top 10. So, what cards from the set do you remember? Did you play Visions at all? What strategies in the cards that you've seen? Let me know in the comments below. Next week, we're going to review the next set, which is Weatherlight, which it ends the Mirage block by picking up a completely new story, new characters that will define the history / future of the Magic the Gathering world. We know Captain Sisay becomes the captain of the aforementioned Weatherlight, and we will meet who the rest of her crewmates will be and why they are going on this journey to begin with. Until then, have a good week, and I'll see you next time for Magic the Conversation. Take care.